Let me give you a bit of a weird intro. Has anyone noticed that I have one arm that looks about 30% larger than the other right now? It's a weird thing to ask. This morning, I went over and got my final ramp shot for my immunotherapy for allergies, for seasonal allergies. And my arm swelled up, as it does. And so that's why. Now, it's a weird thing to mention in a talk like this, but I'll explain a little bit later how immunotherapy and vaccinations in general, whether that's immunotherapy or vaccinations for viruses, kind of relate to AI and how we make them work. So stay tuned for that. If I forget, prompt me later and say, Joe, you said you were going to talk about this.
So should we get the AID handy?
No, it should be good. Yeah, this is my 6th month or so of this, so I'm pretty used to it by this point. All right, so tonight's subject is artificial intelligence. And so does anything really qualify me to talk about this? I would say, other than my hours of research, not really. But my background is I went to Oregon State University for computer science, graduated in 2006, and have worked for the last 19 years as a software engineer, and have recently been fairly well steeped in AI usage and some AI integration. So I've done some integration for personal projects as well as my current company. And then I started to investigate this back around 2015. We had a company that was starting to look into this about 10 years ago. And back then it was woefully inadequate for what we wanted to do. But this presentation is an adaptation of something I presented back then to tell my CEO, drop it for now. But it's changed a lot since then. Anyway, let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, what is AI? What is artificial intelligence? A lot of perspectives on this. AI is whatever hasn't been done yet. One perspective. This is not specifically targeted at AI, but you can see how it might relate. Any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic, as Arthur C. Clarke. I'm sorry, I forgot to mention the prior quote was from Douglas Hofstadter. But basically, once technology gets advanced enough, it's hard to know how does this actually work. In fact, I've even heard theories about smartphones and things like that being the technologies come from who knows what types of sources. Could be from other worlds, from different dimensions. Lack of belief that it's something we developed ourselves. And I can understand that concern because it's just so hard to comprehend, wrap your mind around how it works. So AI just follows suit because it's even more mysterious, even to the people who have developed it. And so what I wanted to do is some demystification of how it works internally. Technology, so AI, general perception of AI. So what people in the general populace tend to think about AI is that it's a technology that thinks and understands like a human, is able to learn, reason, and act with broad intelligence. Sort of how we see AI, that kind of capability. And the current reality is it's basically statistical models that learn patterns from data to make predictions, generate outputs, automate tasks, but without true understanding or general intelligence. So those are the differences as I see them and summarize them. All right, so let's dive into AI categorization. We can categorize it a couple of ways. One is by capability, one is by functionality. By capability, you have the concept of narrow AI, AGI, ASI, we'll dive into what these mean later. And then by functionality, you have reactive machine, limited machine, theory of mind, and self-aware. These were invented by IBM. No one else seems to mention them all that much, but worth mentioning. So we'll go ahead and dive into the capability one. But first, I would say these categories tend to blend together, and there's no consensus on what each of them actually means. So I just sort of came up with my best approximation for each. So narrow AI is what I would call a single aspect AI, meaning it has one capability, one thing it does very well, but it's not multimodal. It's just very good at one specific thing. So some examples would be trend projection. We guess what's going to happen next given some data. Or correlation discovery. Can we figure out how these different groups of data are related to one another? Text detection. Given this image, can I find the text in it? Or text extraction. Given the text in the image, can I pull it out and make it available for use later? Image tagging or border detection. So is this a cat, for example? Or can I find the perimeter around the cat? Can we extract the cat for paste elsewhere, as has been demonstrated here? These are some narrow capabilities and things you might see on your phone.
So Joe.
Yeah.
A simple spell check in a word processor.
Yes.
Is now AI. That's been around for decades.
Do you think it's AI?
Depends on your definition.
Exactly.
So based on what you just said for that narrow or specific.
I would call that narrow AI. Absolutely. Yeah. So
I think it's A, but not I.
is it artificial? Is it synthetic but actually intelligent? I would say it's definitely artificial.
I guess I would make the distinction, simple spell check is probably not, but when it gets to where it's trying to guess what you're trying to spell and where it's autocomplete, you're probably getting into AI. Because otherwise you're just, I mean, what's been around for decades, the simple dictionary lookup.
Right.
Does this exist in my memory? But now it's trying to interpret, oh, I think you meant this.
Yeah. Sure.
Or like my phone likes to, if I do the voice to text and it miscorrects things. I think how it's
What is sometimes called autocorrupt.
yeah.
So yeah, I would say though that even dictionary lookup is a form of AI. It's just from the layperson's perspective, it doesn't look like AI because it's not particularly smart. And so the question is it artificial capability that used to depend on a person to do the work, and has it shifted? And so yeah, that's why it's sort of a continuum.
Sure.
All right, so narrow AI does sort of those small detections. It does one thing well, or maybe well.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, so just some examples here. And then composite AI is something I came up with, a term I coined for this presentation. And it's basically narrow AI, but you're taking multiple narrow AIs and kind of connecting them together to give you some additional capabilities that looks more like general AI. But isn't quite there. So examples of this would be like ChatGPT. These days you can speak to it, it'll speak back to you, you can type into it, it'll type back to you. You can show it an image of something and ask it what it is verbally, and it'll respond back to you, and it'll tell me, like, try to identify who the artists are of these various paintings. So, but that's just composition. It's not necessarily a single model or system that has the capability. It's composite. It's a combination of both.
Can I ask you what Grammarly is then?
Grammarly? It depends on its implementation, and it's changed over time.
Yeah, because it's got different tones and so on and so forth.
And I would say it's shifted from it shifted from deterministic algorithms toward machine learning models, and has probably made sort of a progressive shift in that direction over the last number of years, because machine learning models have been in use for a long time, but their capacity or their capabilities continue to increase exponentially up until the present day. And so I think you're seeing that with products like that, where it's ramped up significantly recently. And so recently seems like they almost have a person sitting in your phone now responding to you, or in your computer, right? But it's because they're starting to use those machine learning models that we'll get into.
What is Siri and Alexa?
Originally more deterministic algorithms, but it was a combination as well. I would call it composite, right? Because you had something that recognized spoken words. So it recognized recognize you speaking and know how to translate that into text, but then it would just do text search to find the right response to ensure that it did the right thing. And so you would use, after you've extracted the text, use a deterministic algorithm to look up some command that it's supposed to perform. And if it can find it, it does it. And if it can't, it just says, I'm sorry, I didn't know what to do. So that's typically how those have worked historically. Now with the latest changes coming into Alexa, it's like an Alexa Pro or something like that. I forget what it is, but you can pay for that, and it uses language models in the background, and it it has far more natural language capability. You can hold conversations with it, as I understand it.
Right.
And so it's a, once again, a continuum of capabilities that are progressively released.
Is there a difference between Siri and Alexa and abilities? Cause I
Yes.
think Siri is just informational and Alexa can do things in your smart home and stuff, turn lights on and.
Yeah, so Alexa tends to have more programmed in capabilities, extensions, things you can add to it. That's how Amazon built it, to be extensible. And Apple just basically says, here's what it does, and that's it.
Yeah.
It doesn't even do it well.
Yeah.
All right, so after the composite AI, we can move on to artificial general intelligence. Basically, it would cover all known aspects. So artificial general intelligence would be expected to be able to know, basically, above average human intelligence should be displayed across all subjects known to humans. So it should be more capable than us, and it should certainly be able to do at least as well as any of us at everything, is the expectation. This is what you might call fantasy land, but it's something that we are trying to shoot for right now. OpenAI, their mission statement was trying to produce this, right? Granted, we can't agree on what it is, so who knows what they're actually trying to produce, but it's, yeah, they want to keep getting better. And it'll require new architecture compared to the current state-of-the-art models to actually be capable of exhibiting these sorts of characteristics. It would need to be more general in its structure, like the human brain, and we're not there yet. And it should be able to learn undirected. All right, artificial superintelligence. Does anyone recognize this character? It's from Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Oh, yeah.
It's deep thought. Far superior intelligence to humans across known and undiscovered subjects. So basically, it should know everything we know across all our subjects and have delved into other subjects we don't know exist or probably cannot ourselves discover exist. This is truly fantasy land. But who knows if it's possible or not. We like to come up with grandiose ideas, and so that's what this is. It's this theoretical next thing. It's what we fear might take over if we just let AGI run loose, which makes sense because you'll have to have it bootstrap itself from a high-performing AGI. At least that's my theory. All right, so now on to how AI works. All right, so back to this statement. Current reality, statistical models and patterns, predictions. It sounds like kind of like a statistics or math class, right? Yeah, it should. The core of modern AI involves math, statistics, data distributions, algorithms, software, parallel computation, and distributed systems, internetworked systems. And sort of the core of how it operates internally is through the concept of probability. So for those who have seen statistics or worked with statistics in the past, have seen these sorts of graphs before, we're seeing various regression algorithms here. So you have a linear regression, polynomial ridge regression, logistic regression. This is an elliptic envelope, but basically ways of describing relationships between data, partitioning the data, grouping the data. These are ways of describing data in a way that, given a new data point, you can approximate where you think it falls. And we have other concepts such as clustering that are applied, and these have been, we use algorithms such as K and NK means. We segregate data by common properties, but these are ways of describing relationships between data. We're not going to the point of discovering, just describing. Support vector machine, and variety of kernels. Basically, more ways of describing data. So moving from algorithms toward groups of data points describing regions within the data. Once again, describing, but not necessarily discovering. We're starting to get toward the patterns that we need in order for us to learn. So let's move on next from describing to modeling. So here's a rough example of how you might model something using sampling. Calculating pi. I remember doing this in computer science class when I was in college, and they were saying throwing, how many darts at a dartboard and discovering the radius or circumference of that dartboard, right? That's effectively what you're doing here. And that sort of throwing lots of data points at it and hoping they stick is a common mechanism used in model development. So for modeling, you can see here examples of actually starting to model, discover, and fit some characteristic to the data. So we're identifying, you can see this one has different colors to it, maybe you can see that. It's a little bit hard to from this distance, but you're identifying different groups, or you're fitting a line to some data to describe its trend. You may be fitting a curve to data to describe its trend. There are all sorts of different ways you try to describe the data and the relationships between it, between the different axes within that data. We'll start to talk more about axes and dimensions. Fitting. So when you're fitting the data, so you're fitting your algorithm, you're fitting your equation or combination of equations to the data, you can have underfitting where you didn't quite line it up correctly with the data, so it gives you a rough approximation, but you don't really have a sense of what probably came before or after based on how something like this line is fit. We're not really sure. You could do sort of a balanced distribution that gives you the ability to predict prior and future, or you can overfit where it's really not meaningful for the prediction or the in either direction, but at least given a data point, you know exactly the correlation. And so up until recently, when we started generating very large models, you really had to be careful about the under versus overfitting concept, which is why I include this. All right, equations and algorithms quickly become too complex to describe vast quantities of data. What if we could intentionally and automatically overfit it? What if we could actually just leverage that more? Then the system could discover the correlations that we want, or even ones we didn't anticipate. So we could throw, because these we're looking at like two axes here, right? 2 dimensions. And we're saying find me the relationship between these 2 dimensions. But what if we want to be able to find out what relationships exist across any number of dimensions? So let's talk about correlation. Once models are trained, we measure similarity or correlation, often geometrically. That seems kind of strange, like why would we be using geometry for this, but get into that. So we have related data. We have sales over time, right? You can see that we've got some nice growth going on here. So now we want to predict what's going to happen next. We're saying, yeah, this is looking good. We're going to do really well here, right? Oh, well, that did not do what we expected. What might we need to get a better sense of what was supposed to happen? What happened there? Oh, that's better. Okay, we've introduced a new dimension. So instead of just sales over time, we've introduced product version. We've seen that we've released a variety of products, and this is just following the trend. And if we included that in there as an additional dimension, we would have been able to predict what might happen next. Since we introduced this new product, we should expect this one to fall off and it to ramp up. Okay, and so we're able to see those sorts of correlations, but as you think about more and more dimensions being included in the data, it's harder and harder to predict the relationships between them. And so that's where maybe the machines could help us if we could deal with any number of dimensions. So let's talk about correlation via proximity. Via proximity. So we use vectors to describe a position in n-dimensional space. So we're talking about dimensions here, right? We had 3 dimensions, so we started with that 2 dimensions, and then we added 3 and we got more information. And so we're talking about n-dimensional space because we don't know how many correlations we want to be able to describe. The Euclidean distance formula can be used to compute the difference between 2 n-dimensional points, or vectors as we like to call them within the machine learning realm. So basically, the final square root on this operation can be skipped because all we need to know is the ratio between the distances and the ones that are closest versus furthest away. It doesn't necessarily matter if we have precision, like what was the actual distance. It's just a relative distance. So let's start with something like very simple example, one dimensional. We have a number line, we all remember this from math class. And let's say we pick any one of these. If we've modeled this correctly, we should be able to return for this domain of its three numbers, what the ordering ought to be for the next closest. And so if we select 5, it's 16, then 20, etc., etc. In 2 dimensions, we should be able to do the same given multiple points. So given the selection of, say, the purple point, what are the next closest? We should be able to find the correlations, the relationships between those points in 2 dimensions. And the same, let's see. Yeah, so that's done via distance. So once again, Euclidean geometry, Euclidean distance. So you have your a squared equals b squared plus c squared, right? The setup. And so you know the relationship between those. And so this is determined by, as the square, these squares, this is related to the distance. And so you can determine relationship between the correlations. So when we go back to this example, what's that?
I love this because I got a minor in mathematics. I just don't, want to make sure that we are, and obviously you've had a lot of math too. We just don't want to get too far away from the
Right.
topic.
Okay, I'll try to get back to that.
Humble suggestion.
I was gonna say, you must be a math teacher. If you
All right.
read it.
All right, so 3-dimensional point correlation, and then moving on to n-dimensional. So we don't have know how many dimensions will be needed for our model. So we're just going to give it a bunch, 1,000 or more. This is what we put in these larger models that we build these days. So that's sort of the idea. So now let's move on to training. Vaccination or immunotherapy. Does anyone want to venture a guess as to how this is related to training? What does an immunization or immunotherapy do to our body?
Challenges of weakness, with weakness.
Makes it swell up.
Especially if you don't ramp it first, but if you train it.
Yeah.
And slowly teach it, either this is okay. Or just blast it with something and it says, I don't like that. It's going to respond violently when it comes back again and eradicate it. So you train the body, you're teaching it what to do next. And so my body's in the process of being trained up in the same way we would train an AI by throwing volumes at it and it figures out how to handle it correctly. So that's the correlation there. Every connection in a model is represented. So a model is kind of like the human brain. You have sort of the concept of a neuron, and then you have the synapses that connect. And so your neurons are connection points. It really exists just to move the data around between or over the synapses.
Yeah.
And so in the AI model, we have the nodes and we have the connections, the weights between them. And so for every connection in the model, it has some weight that describes the relationships between all the different data points and how strongly each neuron impacts the others described by those weights as you're working your way through a model. We start off uniform, but as we train, begin to actually apply weights and encode the space of the data that we've ingested and the relationships between it into all those neural interconnections within the system. I won't bother you with this. This is just sort of talking through what the process looks like for reinforcement feedback and all that sort of stuff. Where basically you're feeding all the data into the model, but it kind of looks like this. You have input data that you generates or where you perform a prediction on it. So the model performs the prediction on the input data. Then you compare that to some target, the expected output. And then based on its result, you're going to feed back to it either no, you're basically warmer, colder, right? Is what you're telling it. So you're saying, add to that, yes, that's stronger, that's positive feedback, that's right, you're going in the right direction. Or no, you're actually kind of far off, negative, so it pulls that back and it decreases those connections that it thought it was using correctly. And so you're slowly tuning it into the shape of the data and the correlations between the data as you're training it, and it just continues in this loop for billions, trillions of cycles to build these models. All right, so we talked about the concept of the neurons, the synapses. Look at the actual structure of these neural networks and what they look like that are the basis for our current models. Looks something like this, just much bigger. So this is not to scale. This is just a small example of the sort of the interconnectedness. You get a sense of how many connections, the vast number of connections there are inside of one of these models. Similar to the human brain, that same sort of capability. But the models are less sophisticated than the human brain. They are more connected. The human brain is less connected because it uses proximity as more of a control. We've started to leverage that in models by introducing more of these layers. So by introducing more of these and then even having regional sections that disconnect from other regions nearby, it helps to simulate more how the human brain works and does a better job of pattern recognition and correlation discovery. Yes.
The attachments that Musk's group of put on someone's brain, are they intended to go ahead and make up for distance? I mean, the abilities, the limitations of the human brain? You know what I'm talking
I
about?
do, but I'm not very Neuralink. But I'm not as familiar with that technology.
Yeah,
It's leveraged, it's really meant as a way for the human brain to directly communicate with and control something.
oh, I see.
And so, and it's been demonstrated to work pretty well, but they've had trouble keeping things connected and attached, which is why they just throw a bunch of leads in there. And they also don't know where they're going to connect them to. So what they do, the brain figures it out. So when they put those in there, they just shove a bunch of these leads in there, and the brain figures out which ones manipulate what, and the person through training trains their brain to actually control things.
But the thing is, we only use, what, 3%, 5% of our brain?
At any given time, yes,
Yeah.
but all of it's eventually used at some point. So we never use it all at once. That's one of the other great things about our brains versus these models, far more energy efficient.
Well, that's kind of an urban legend, that you only use X% of your brain.
Yeah, it is.
Nobody has really any idea.
If you're using it all at once, you're probably having a seizure.
Oh, yeah.
Richard,
Yeah, the thing I was reading about the other night that's fascinating is that this has defined connections.
mhm,
It turns out that the human brain has things going on that we do not understand.
oh yeah,
There's things that are not wired between neurons, and it somehow communicates either chemically or spatially in some way.
yeah, there are actually gaps between the chemicals pass between.
Yes, yeah, there's no direct connection.
Yeah, maybe we'll do a session on psychology, that was my minor, and later. But we can talk about the,
But that kind of differentiates us from what we
Right.
think of as AI.
Yeah.
Because we
the
can-
brain can change too. The physical topology here does not change unless the next
Mm.
model is released. It's not changing itself on the fly. That's something that AGI or superintelligence would be expected to do when we theorize about it. Is it should be able to rework itself, restructure itself on the fly, change and improve how it works internally. Should work how the brain does, but on a far grander scale. And that's what our minds can do, is they can reorganize themselves, they can shift, they can increase connections. When a child is formed, or when a child reaches around 2 years of age, there's a massive pruning that happens. They have an explosion where a ton of connections are made in the brain, and then there's massive pruning happening as they start to really learn, as they walk around the world and interact with people, learning language, things like that. It prunes back what they don't need. And so, that ability to modify itself is sort of what we're trying to simulate here. We don't have the exact same capability where it's a physical modification. It's just weight modification. So
As at the highest level, has AI been able to model the human brain and make assessments based on those models? Run it through the human model, see what the result is, and then refine it or adjust it or follow it.
it can produce similar outputs or similar conclusions.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's the model for the human brain, has it attempted to model the human brain so that it can guesstimate how someone might respond.
You can try to guess how someone might respond. It's gonna have more difficulty guessing how someone will change over time.
When you said that it starts to prune out things that it doesn't need,
Yeah,
is that like when we lose the ability to make some sounds because they're not in our language?
I don't know. I'd have to look into that one. Yeah, you piqued my curiosity there. I might have to look into that. I wouldn't be surprised if that's the case. And that's something that they would study with children who are raised in a different culture from where they were born. And I believe they have those capabilities. So it has to do with, so I think it is tied to that. All right. So back to that concept of weights. Weights, the numeric values we described earlier, describe the strength of connections between the neurons in this virtual brain that we have. Real systems like this have tens, hundreds of layers, and per layer can have millions, or I don't know if it's billions, but
Trillions.
it wouldn't be trillions. I don't think that they have models quite that large with individual layers having that volume. You think so?
I think I've heard that they're approaching that,
I mean, I never said total volume yet.
but there's still, I think the complexity of the human brain's like 100 trillion
I don't know.
connections and.
Well, yeah, the connection count is wild. I mean, the number of neurons is phenomenal. and
So
the
they're only
connections
like
are-
1%, the largest models are only like 1% of the human brain, I think.
We are fearfully and wonderfully made.
We sure are. It's a good call out. We are fearfully and wonderfully made.
Hmm.
And this is why we tend to build things after the design that God gave us, right? We make our models like the human brains, we make our airplanes like
Tower
his
of
birds.
Babel.
Yeah. Alright. So there's just a rough demonstration of the different types of networks that exist. There's a large variety, and I'll zoom in a little bit on these. There are many layer types. There are many combinations of layers that you can use. And this is the one from back in 2016. And that'll be important later. But there's still quite a variety back then when they were just exploring a lot of this. So we can zoom in on some of these and just see the differences in structure and similarity in structure between some of these, the different types of cells that are involved, connections, weights. Some of the ones that I thought were more interesting were the deep convolutional network, often related to image processing. Long short term for temporal dimensions, so dealing with events over time. And belief networks or assumptive reasoning, trying to figure out missing features. So this would probably be used in something like, let's say you have a Photoshop that can guess what the background looks like when you're taking an image and saying, please erase this. All right, we'll look at model types. There are a number of different types here, and I'll just blast through these real quick because this is boring, there are no pictures.
These pictures.
Classical, we have SVM, XGBoost. These are the prior style models that we would use before the deep learning models, just for structured tabular data. This stuff we were looking at the very beginning of the presentation, some of those relationships. We have those for text, speech, time series, those for constructing data or learning about data distributions, those for making decisions, control. These tend to be smaller models that are very good at more Boolean style logic, where they're making decisions between should I do this, should I do this. They can control other models but don't understand mass volumes in text, and so they can interact with each other. Good part of a compositing model. And then vision focused for image, video, spatial geometry. You have your convolutional neural networks. We showed an example of that earlier, and NERFs. And then, yeah, here's an example of a duck generated by a convolutional neural network. And then we have LLMs. Maybe many of you are familiar with the term LLM, large language model. It's what we see used behind systems like ChatGPT or Gemini. or grok.
Hmm.
And then you have RAG. I don't know if you've heard of RAG. That is retrieval augmented generation. Basically, it's able to store data in the background and reference it. So it can actually look up information using vectors. And we'll talk about that in a little bit here, what vectors are and how those work. Yeah. Dominant architecture for text, multimodal reasoning, and retrieval tasks. They call it reasoning, mostly just generating more text. All right, so let's dive deeper into an example of large language models as they are deployed and how that works. But before I do that, I know I've kind of blasted through. I want to give people a chance to ask questions and get clarification about anything we've covered thus far.
These models that you're showing, they can be used in conjunction with one another. They aren't just standalone approaches.
Right.
They have to be. I heard a song played over the radio this morning. The song is a country western song, has a male voice, speaks to cultural things going on, and is beautiful both melodically and rhythmically.
Mhm.
And is completely AI generated, not one human aspect in any of that. It's right now #1 in the country western charts.
Yeah.
Wow.
How many brains is that thing speaking to? You know? I mean, human brains listening to that and processing what they're
Right.
hearing on all those different levels. So all of these different things you're talking about are processes that have to be melded together in impressive machines to come up with these things that we thought only humans with a soul could produce. I think.
It might even be as simple as a single model that can do this. Because it has to do with the size of the model, what you've trained it on. And so if you're asking it, like if you combine the concept of this text describes this song, we combine that together and do that consistently across all of the songs we fed into it. We fed it millions of songs with descriptors and details in there, as well as maybe the lyrics as part of it, so it doesn't have to figure that out. Or maybe it can feed that to another model to pull the lyrics out.
Apparently it did.
So it could be doing composite, or it could just be averaging it together and coming up with what people find most pleasing, or these highest ranked songs. Here's an average of all human music. And so if we amplify these characteristics, what we produce is a song that just sounds good to everyone.
So how many neural vectors are there in that process?
I don't know how many operations. You're running trillions and trillions of calculations to generate something like that per note, probably.
I think the real question is, since it's country western,
How was I listening to that panel?
if you play it backwards. You
Man.
We're gonna look at an example not of music generation, but large language models. Something that I don't know, how many of you, by show of hands, have actually worked with, say, something akin to ChatGPT? Yeah, so there's at least 40% familiarity here.
I did a neural network on my Commodore.
Nice. How many connections?
4. I still got a big 20 if you wanna. I'm gonna come to 60.
That like a slightly older Raspberry Pi.
It's not as smart as a Raspberry Pi.
All right. So let's talk about speaking the model's language. We tend to think of them as being tremendously capable, understanding our language very well, but really the model does not speak English. Not technically. Because computers work on numbers, right?
Mhm.
And so to get it to actually communicate, we have to take text, we have to tokenize it, embed it, and then send it to the model. So the model can then compute logits, and then we can decode those back out and convert that into text that we can then send back to the person. There are many hidden steps involved in something like communicating with this type of system. This is not uncommon for us as well, right? A human brain does not sit on a shelf and communicate with anything, right? Even if it was attached to a heart, because it needs senses and ways to interact with the world. This is sort of what this is like for these systems. It has to have these translation layers. And so we have these hard-coded and defined, but it doesn't figure these out. We've defined exactly what it's going to look like going in. It figures out its internal structure as it trains, and then we handle how the data comes out on the other end as well. So we've built those translation layers, its eyes, its ears, all that. Does that make sense? All right, so let's talk about the input text. This comes from the user or extracted from a source. It can come out of an image, video, document, maybe even another model. And our text is the cat sat on the mat. Okay, we gotta split this up into tokens. We got 6 tokens here. The cat sat on the mat. Colorize them so it's really easy to follow. What do we do next? We have to map these tokens to IDs. This is the space of tokens the model understands. For every single token, every word it recognizes in every language, we have encoded a numeric value describing that. So if it doesn't see, or if we don't have a token for it, it doesn't get that input. So we decide what inputs it can read. If we don't want it to read Chinese, we just delete that portion, of the system, and we don't include any numbers for it in its training and can't communicate to it. Or we just don't give it anything as input, but it's part of its training. And when it gives us back output, if we can't recognize it because it doesn't translate correctly, we can't decode it on the other end either. It has to be in our formal definition of the token map with an ID associated with every single token. This is important later, so just picture this as a gigantic list that has a number. It's kind of like a phone book that associates a number with every word.
Why is the up there have 2 different numbers?
Which ones?
THE.
Oh, that's a really good question. That's my fault. I got the 7 right. No, that's not bad. I stared at this for so long, I can't believe I didn't notice that.
I was just curious. Yeah, actually.
I was just testing you, I'm glad you caught it.
Different colors. So.
The machine would not have figured that out, because it would just assume that's a totally different word.
So part of the digression here, but if we have AI employed widely, this nation and that nation, and they go to war with one another, then my goal would be, if I'm on one side, to remove all the numbers from the other guy's computer that speaks his language. And so, you would disarm them.
But you'd have to be able to modify how the model works internally.
Right.
Now, if you have different mappings to different token IDs, that would work if you were dealing with raw input to the model. The thing is, the model itself, from our perspective, works on raw text, which covers all languages. From the model's perspective,
Right.
It already understands all languages.
It's the inputs assignment.
Right, so typically it's inputs and outputs. It already knows how to. So if I feed text into ChatGPT's or open APIs like I do for my Slack bot, it just knows what those are because it's wrapped all that away from the rest of the system. And the AIs have been designed in such a way that they're gonna know how to translate any language character. Now, you could come up with new words they haven't heard of. You come up with a new language, that's gonna be a lot harder for them to figure out. But the correlations between the words you use, it's probably gonna understand that, quickly decode what your new language means.
Or if I take the old language and spoof it by changing the meanings of all the assigned letters.
Right.
Assigned
Piglet.
numbers.
Yeah.
Well, we did that in, what was that movie where they were blue? They made up a language for it.
Oh, for Avatar.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Two things, Mark, China has already embedded in a number of the DJI, for example, drones are you can't buy them, the government can buy those or use those. But the other thing is too, is our language is simpler than the Chinese language. We've got a dual changeover that, so they're already one step ahead, closer to doing the manipulation.
How many tokens are there in English versus Chinese? So if we're talking about words versus
Oh,
language tokens, there's a difference there. So I think word-wise, English actually has more tokens that are used on the whole in the language. Because we adopt from every other language. So I think token-wise, there's some overlap there as well.
But if we adopt from other languages, then, you know, there are, allies are just as vulnerable, or become vulnerable too. Because of their language is already run through the. But keep going, I'm sorry.
sorry to take us sideways.
But the average English speaker uses 40,000 words. But I think there's many millions of words in the English language.
It's another thing I'll have to look at.
Just ask your AI.
Yeah, I know, right? All
Even
right,
if it has to make it up.
you'll come up with some answer, right? So long as the solutions or the sources it pulled it from were accurate, it'll be accurate. All right, each ID then, and this is gonna bug me that I have the in there twice, so thanks for pointing that out. But each of those gets translated, and look, I actually gave it different values, unfortunately. But we're gonna ignore that for now, pretend like those are two different words. We're gonna say someone accidentally put like an accent mark on one of them, we'll call it its own word. We're basically generating vectors, and these vectors are kind of like those n-dimensional points in the giant space that the AI understands. So it can describe relationships between these different words. These vectors are associated with these various IDs, and really these vectors represent tokens in the AI's internal space. And it's trying to figure out, or it has a mapping of their relationship to one another in different contexts. And so that's what these vectors represent to us, is multidimensional relationships. And these vectors can be hundreds, thousands of components. They represent thousands of potential dimensions in order to discover relationships we couldn't describe ourselves, but it figured out through learning through vast numbers of documents. We then take our vectors and we perform positional offsets. Because we have to determine where did this vector fall in the context of the sentence we pass to it. That's not something that it just knows about. It has to be told, here's the offset of that within this overall text. And that has meaning encoded in it as well. And so by applying that shift, we're able to describe where its offset is, and that actually impacts its meaning in the context of this particular sentence. So you can see something like, we take a vector, it's an actual mathematical vector. So this vector here, shift it to the origin, find its actual head location, and then shift it back by the tail point. And by applying that to the zeroed location of the head, we get the new head. And that's its actual positional adjustment in n-dimensional space.
I'm sorry, my brain must be getting full.
Yeah.
Is this a process where you're like trying to predict the next word in a sentence, or?
This is just trying to tell it where the word is in the sentence. The word, so we're still at the point of just trying to get the data into the machine.
Okay,
And to do that, it needs to know what are the tokens or the words you're handing to me, and what's the order of those words. And we have to kind of shift things off so that it knows where those words land by adjusting where they are in three-dimensional space. It's really the relationships between the values that describe. So it's the relationships between the values. So for example, if you look at these two, the relationship between 3 and 4 and 6, 6, these relationships to each other in two-dimensional space are the same when it comes to distance from some other point, right? And so that's sort of what we're describing as we shifted, its relationship to other points gets adjusted, but its position across all the dimensions as it's shifted in that multidimensional space remains consistently offset. And so from its perspective, it's still the same token. From the machine's perspective, it's still the same token. But you have to shift it so that it knows it's coming after this token, and that token's coming after this token. It's a way of ordering. So I know this would be the hardest part of this whole thing, is describing this aspect, but you have to do the positional adjustment. And so we renamed this to 37P, so we know this is a position adjusted vector. But it still represents a token. So think of it as like the word the. All right. Then we can feed this into the model. We got everything adjusted, shifted. All of these position adjusted tokens can be fed into the model. We're ready to collect its output after it's done its internal processing. So it processes this one chunk of text that we passed in. And then it kicks out. Remember that ID link, or the ID list I talked about before? That has every single ID with every single word? Yeah, it returns that back to you and says, here's the probability that this word is the next one that I want to generate. And here's the probability that this word is. It returns the entire set back of every word it knows and gives you a probability that each one is the next. So it gives you your entire, it's like, can you imagine doing that? You're like trying to compose an essay and you have to go through and you like hand back and rank to the computer, like here are all the different words and the probabilities that this is the one I chose as my next word, and then it picks the one with the highest probability. So basically what it's doing. So yeah, does that ranking, performs the softmax operation, don't worry what that is. And then the model itself will then select the next word using one mechanism, either just grabbing the highest probability or some other algorithm. And then that token that it just generated, that word that it said, oh, this is what should come next. So given your input prompt, this is the next word that should go there. It then goes through and repeats that whole thing for every next word needs to be generated. You wonder why they cost a lot to run. So here we go. Our first run through. Here are our inputs. It kicks out 14V. That's a vector. All right, let's take and do some positional adjustment because we've added that to the end of the list. We now have to position it on position 7, and it kicks out another word, position 77V. So let's push everything through this and run through that model and kicks out the end token that says, okay, at this point we're done generating. I think we should stop. And we say, all right, we have our 2 additional words that have come out, our tokens. We're going to decode those. And so 14V is 14, which is the word and. I don't think he's done before. And then 77 is weighted. So then we've got our new estimated final result that the machine thought should come. The cat sat on the mat and waited. So this is what it generated in response. We have our first 6 that were our input, and this is what it thinks the whole thing should say. So it generated these 2 tokens. And so this is what it would look like to pass the text in, run it through the model, and have it kick out a response. And that's sort of what you're getting. You talk to ChatGPT and say, hey, surprise me with something. And it spews out an essay. Does it pretty quick.
Doesn't sound like it's gonna take over the world.
No, it doesn't. But it's hard to know. It's fun to speculate, huh? That's what the follow-up talk will be about, is the speculation portion. And we can talk about societal economic impacts and all that stuff. Which at this point is mostly speculation. It should be interesting. All right. So let's talk about accuracy. Any questions first about large language models and that rough overview of how they work? Was that fairly easy to follow, or does anyone feel lost?
I'm sure. And waited.
Trust me.
Tell it all again like a 5.
That's what I was trying to do, I'm sorry. All right. An ounce of estimation is worth a pound of precision, as they say. Maybe I'm misquoting that. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe I want precision rather than just estimation. Yeah. AI is probabilistic. Always verify critical outputs. And it seems like maybe I should qualify that with critical, maybe just always verify the outputs, but, and that's probably a good idea, but if you're using it for entertainment, it may not matter as much. And that's a really good use for it, tends to be entertainment. You're less worried about how accurate it is in that situation. Like in this, I said, let's try to regenerate that chart that I used earlier. I want you to build it for me. So I asked ChatGPT, because it has a built-in ability to like draw you a graph or something. I thought this will be great. Let's just take that and update it for the modern era. And it tried, and it did not work well. It's really good at approximating what it looked like. It has the right colors, sort of. It has the right sort of shapes. There are links between them. But then you look closer and you start to see problems like, why do these not link to anything? The arrows go in random directions. Well, there are things where there's like, yeah, this screen is not even connected to anything else. There are two network models. So, yeah, it's got a long way to go. It doesn't understand everything. We don't have a model that understands everything. There are definitely some breakdowns when you try to jump between, let's translate this image to text, then back to image again. It just doesn't quite get it, especially with this level of complexity. There's still a long ways to go. Hence, verify. So where does accuracy break down? Token prediction. So we were talking about that with the LLM and how we were able to, given an input sequence of tokens, generate an output sequence of tokens. Each step is a probability guess. So it's just saying, this is probably what comes next. Given all the essays I've read and all the books I've read and all the different things I've read, this is what I think should come next, because this is what the majority of people in this situation probably would have written, given my past training. Accumulation. Small errors accumulate as text grows larger. So if you get slightly off with your prediction, it compounds. It's kind of like solving a math problem. That's why they tell you to show your work, right? Like if you don't, you can't find where you went off. And this is what happens this is why people often instruct the AI, show your work. Walk me through the steps, and it'll actually give better results. And they're starting to leverage that approach, is to have it step through what it did, and it improves the quality because it can check its own work afterward and say, oh, I've talked through it. And it'll even catch itself and say, well, that's not right, and keep working through until it eventually spits out something more accurate than it would have otherwise. So, yeah. Errors accumulate. Distribution shift. The model may not have seen anything like your input. If it's never seen anything like that, hasn't seen your language, doesn't know the characters you're inputting, it can't really work with it. It'll give it best guess and spew something out, but it'll probably look like garbage. So if an alien comes in and tries to feed information into it, someone from outer space, we're probably not going to be able to communicate with them via the AI, but who knows? All right, hallucination. The model predicts plausible tokens, not true tokens. This is probably what's next. You can see it's a probability distribution that spits out all those IDs. It's not just saying, here's the next token. It's saying, these two are probably tied. You're going to have to flip a coin to pick which one's next, and we'll go from there. And the lack of grounding. No direct link to the real world state of facts without external tools. It has to link out to the external world to reference things. This is why ChatGPT will have to query and say, let me go search Google for that real quick. Yeah, I think I found it. Go ahead, Richard.
Can all of these be iteratively worked on by a machine, or do humans have to go in and fine tune these things?
Right now, we kind of have to fine tune these and build in corrective measures. Although when you give certain directives to the machine, you can get it to, as the example I gave earlier, you can tell it, talk me through your process, and it'll increase the quality because, and you can even say, lay out a plan first, then work through the steps, reiterate if you need to, and come back and then only give me an answer once you're pretty confident that you got the right result. and it'll keep looping until it's actually reached a successful conclusion in its own mind. So, and so there are ways you can manipulate it and try to get it to do that. Once again, even that text that it's using is an approximation of what a human conversation with themselves would look like if they were doing that. Just how it does that process. And so, is it really thinking? I don't think so.
But the iterative human talking to it, communicating to it, what does improve the process?
If a person iterates back and forth with it,
Yeah, if it questions things that are coming out.
yeah, that can help. And that's where the concept mixture of models works. Well, they'll take multiple models, sometimes the same model, and just tell it it's an expert in some other field and its quality boosts in that field. This person boosts in this field. They talk to each other and the net output is higher quality. Just by telling it that it's an expert. Because otherwise, if you told it, okay, you're gonna act like you're an expert in literature and solve this computer science problem, it may just return garbage. It's like, oh, okay, well, in that situation, I would have a lot of trouble. And so direction is a really important aspect of this as well. The prompt.
It's also very confident. Its answer to you is.
Confidently wrong is something I hear all the time when people talking about AI.
Yes.
Confidently wrong.
I was writing a program the other day
Oh no,
and it would tell me, this is absolutely bulletproof.
Right.
I would run it and it wouldn't run. Every program it would give me, this is absolutely bulletproof. This is gonna work. No, it isn't.
and then when you come back and tell it, no, it'll say, you're absolutely right.
Absolutely right.
I should have done it this way.
I think there's a lot of self-affirmation going on.
Yeah,
Tell them what they wanted.
affirmation, yeah. I don't know if the model's doing that internally to itself, but definitely doing it to you when you interact with it.
So I was asking AI on the internet, how do I cut out a 4x8 sheet of styrofoam to insulate my garage door? And I had 8 panels
Oh,
that were this dimension. And I told them all that. And it was great. The language that it came out with, the grammar was perfect. First you do this and this and this. But if I cut it up the way that it said, I would only have enough for half the panels. It assumed for some reason that I had another sheet there.
Oh.
So if I had kept asking it,
Yeah,
more specific,
Yeah.
would it have come out with a
maybe,
better result?
maybe. I have found that it can be really interesting to go on iterative conversations with it, and it'll iterate with you, but it doesn't guarantee you're gonna approach an accurate solution. Sometimes you can actually get them to leverage external tools that can benefit them. So, for example, there are integrations between ChatGPT and Wolfram Alpha, which is really good at mathematical concepts. Now, it uses more deterministic systems under the covers to perform mathematical operations. And so it may be able to help it recognize a pattern, be able to look up how to do something there, and then apply that formula or compose and identify the right formula and then tell Wolfram, go run this, and then it can give you the answer. Once again, that's composition. And so that's composing multiple models together, or can be taking a model and combining it with a tool, like a mathematical system that it knows how to interact with to get it to do the right thing. And it knows it'll be correct because that system is deterministic, not probabilistic, like the AI.
I'm glad I read it through before I started cutting.
Right? Yeah. Mistrust and verify. I made a mistake.
Is that what Mr. Reagan said?
Wasn't that it?
That's Reagan's quote.
Should have put his picture on here. All right, and this is my own quote. The greatest risk with AI is that we will trust it too much. And I repeat that a lot just because I find myself doing that. I'll run to ChatGPT and say, oh, just answer this for me real quick. And just not bother to check it and then go back and look later. And sometimes it's wrong. And other times it's right, but I try to remind myself that regularly. No, okay, go back and verify this. Run that by a friend. Don't, phone a friend from time to time. Like Richard real quick and then I'll back to Kurt.
I read a book on AI recently that said the large language model is distorting that terribly. Because you as a human being believe it if it speaks to you.
Right.
There's something in the human brain that says, oh yeah, this is a real human talking.
Yeah. I'm not surprised that that's the case.
Hmm.
We have a tendency towards trust associated with familiarity.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But that's no different than it's always been.
Right, between people.
Back when I was in college, PCs were new. We had an engineering fair and there was a computer that had a screensaver that had a clock. All these random people walking through would stop and set their watch. Because on a computer, it must be right. This was 40 years ago. So nothing's really changed.
Maybe sometime I should describe NTP, Network Time Protocol. We can talk about how the clocks sync these days. Yeah, trust. It's a risk. And that's the end of this presentation. I'll move on to questions. So Kurt, go ahead.
I had a picture of my dog that I wanted him to modify and vectorize from.
As well
And it
as,
did a great job, but it wasn't my dog. That was a whole different dog. And I thought, well, that's not my dog, but it didn't quite understand that complaint.
and they have new models that they keep experimenting with and releasing all the time that are better and better at taking the input and staying true to it and modifying it. So some of these new video editors that you may have seen are really good at taking either an input image or an input video and modifying it some way, but keeping the characteristics, especially of the character in it, unmodified, which is pretty impressive. Once again, they're gonna be different style models though. They're specialized and focused on something like video or something, yeah, so they're still narrow after a fashion, right? And that's part of what can make things difficult is you're trying to combine like an image or a video that you already have and then using words to describe how you want it modified. And words describing modifications to things and then actually doing it and being able to pass that in as a training set is pretty difficult to get. It's hard to find high volumes of content like that, which makes it harder to train systems like this. But they're still making impressive strides at it.
The images that it can bring up are just mind blowing.
Did you see my hook?
Yeah, yeah. Faces, we can tell the difference a little bit better on a face because we're looking at faces all the time. We really know all the faces, but when you come to landscape, man, you cannot tell.
Mhm. Especially at a distance.
Yeah,
Yeah, and it becomes harder and harder. And part of it is, what is it, it's sort of just averaging things together.
yeah.
And they keep just increasing the size of the models, making them bigger and bigger, so that they have more and more connections. They can average in more of the wrinkles on my forehead, things like that, and it just becomes harder to tell whether
Yeah,
it's actually real.
that's what's so scary these days.
Well, if you read a lot of science fiction,
Yeah.
when they're creating their super intelligence, they're always isolating it from the
Oh,
world.
yeah.
That's the biggest thing.
Yep.
Gotta keep it isolated. You look at the model, the way it's being developed that's exactly the opposite of that. Let's
Yeah.
put it on the internet. That's the first thing, put it on the internet.
Yeah, give it control of my computer and let it search the internet.
Yeah.
Let it control things as soon as possible, because then it can automate and save us some money.
I'm sorry. Like hell.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't do that. Any other questions or commentary, disagreements on my summary? Yeah, Richard.
This is far aside from what you've been talking about, but I was reading today that there's a AI bubble coming up in the market. Because it's like 30-some% of the stock market is connected with AI.
Mhm.
And what they're finding now is that there are circular investments, like NVIDIA will invest in OpenAI, And AI will come back and invest in NVIDIA.
Yeah.
And that it's compounding the whole potential for a bubble.
Yeah, it helps to inflate the bubble,
Yeah, it pushes the bubble.
Yeah,
because you can call it revenue, even if it comes back to you.
That's right.
Yeah.
It's gone around the circle, so it's yours.
Yeah.
well, they are having a hard time building as many NVIDIA chips as there's.
I'm not surprised that
you know.
it's pretty wild. Yeah.
Speaking of demand, this burgeoning process
Mhm.
takes an awful lot of power to make it happen.
Yes.
And that has been garnering a good bit of controversy too,
Yeah.
in that what AI is beginning to demand is more than our country can deliver. And the same is true in other places as well.
Yeah, I've heard it's been having impacts on communities,
Yeah.
not necessarily as much availability of power, although that is a concern, but the cost of power to the community and the power companies having deals with the AI companies that they won't charge them as much for it, and they pawn that off on the consumers, the residents nearby, to actually cover that difference.
Well,
And there's a lot of, I think, rightful frustration with that kind of thing happening.
well, the opposite approach is also out there where the AI companies will be building their own power.
Yeah,
Mr. Gates is pursuing that as we speak, meaning nuclear plants
yeah,
run by commercial entities instead of governmentally controlled entities as was the
And
past.
there's a whole business in these small modular nuclear reactors.
Yeah,
And then fuel cells that convert natural gas directly to electricity is not really the rage, because they can just move them in on a truck, set them down next to the thing, hook up some gas to it.
But one of the strings is that they take priority. They have to have continuous power all the time, and so the community, if they're short on power, the community loses power and.
Yeah.
And, you know, nobody likes that answer.
especially in the winter.
Yes,
right.
Or the summer if you're downtown.
Trying to go isolated solar.
And
Yeah,
then
there
you
was
throw
an
crypto
interesting,
into the mix.
Man.
You throw crypto into the mix, taking power, so.
Oh, yeah.
mining crypto. There was an interesting thing from Musk too today that he has a multi-solution to the problem. AI on satellites, build enough satellites so you shade the earth. You solve the climate warming.
Oh.
I like that one.
Send the AIs to outer space and have them live on the satellites.
Yeah,
Big flashlight up there.
So much for astrophotography, huh?
oh, yeah. You're not important either.
The last solar storm probably would have disrupted that one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Any more questions?
lots of questions.
Thanks, Joe.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
We had one more. We just wanted to make sure we got to yours as well. Yeah.
Just a comment, if you own an iPhone, it's called Apple Intelligence. Any different?
Oh, the Apple Intelligence? Have you heard the term vaporware? It refers to software that was intended to be released, described, presented to the prospective consumers, and then never came out. Apple Intelligence seems to be that at this point. I heard a recent interview that they spoke to a couple of the executives at Apple, and they said they basically admitted, yeah, we thought it was going to make better progress, and it didn't. So we basically just hauled back on it, and we're just going to work on integrating different aspects. And you look at their live translation, that's sort of an example of built-in intelligence capabilities that really are seamless. And that's what they are trying to focus on more. And it's probably the right way to do things so that it helps you in a seamless way. So you're not having to learn how to interact with it. At my company, for example, they're just telling us, use more AI, figure out how to make it useful. And we're like, when we get a good product, we'll know how to use it because it's intuitive and we'll know that it's meaningful and useful, but just telling us to use it, it doesn't necessarily make sense. That's how Apple Intelligence sort of felt. We're just like, it's just smart. And then it wasn't.
Yeah.
Well, they're now up to, for a server rack now, are now up to 600 kilowatts in a server
In a
rack.
rack.
And then you have people telling, well, I'm gonna put that in your phone. And you go, yeah.
You gotta reformulate the structure for it to actually work well and efficiently, right?
Be a good hand warmer for when you're up.
Oh, yeah.
1980s, I told a general in the Air Force that this would never be possible. Oops. Just to manage calendars a little bit, our normal rhythm for having Bible and Science would put our next gathering on November 27th, which happens to be Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
So you'll all be probably sleeping your turkey off when that occurs. So instead, we'll skip that time and we'll get together on December 11th. Will be our next time. And the next time after that is December 25th. That's a calendar. That's just not friendly. So December 11th will be our next gathering. God bless you all and thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.